ARK Survival Ascended may be a remaster of ARK Survival Evolved, however the developers have made quite a few changes to creatures and even added new features, abilities, or gave many existing creatures a TLC update. In this video I'll be showcasing 50 plus creature changes in ARK Survival Ascended, so let's get straight into it. Kicking things off with a more recent change which came with the Ice Wyvern, a much loved creature, however a much welcomed TLC came with the Ragnarok release. The Ice Wyvern's inventory now acts as a portable refrigerator, giving a massively increased spoil timer to most consumable items in the game. The Ice Wyvern is actually more efficient at preserving consumables than the refrigerator and even the tech feeding trough. The Rock Golem also received a bit of TLC with the Scorched Earth release back in the day. It can now strafe left and right when mounted, making it much easier to maneuver. They also gave it a slight glow up in the form of some glowy eyes, which is much more noticeable at night time. The Oviraptor received a beautiful TLC when the game first released. It now has the option to pick up fertilized and non-fertilized eggs within a certain radius around your base. It will pick up eggs automatically once selected and will collect eggs well above its weight capacity, which can be enabled via its radial menu. A similar change to that is the Dung Beetle, also receiving a much needed TLC, now having the option to auto-collect feces for you, so there's no need to level up weight anymore to carry more poop. It works the exact same way as the Oviraptor, able to collect poop within a radius around your base. One thing to note is that it does still need to be set to wander to be able to convert poop into oil and fertilizer. The moss drops can now harvest sap from trees on Scorched Earth. It's not a lot by any means, but every little helps, right? All shoulder pets can now be accessed when perched on the player's shoulder, which is done by pressing and holding the reload button. I cannot stress how useful this feature has been. Back in ARK Survival Evolved, the Cinomacrops was the only shoulder pet with this simple but extremely useful feature. The Achatina now reduces the weight of organic polymer by 90% when placed inside its inventory, which surprisingly was not a thing in Survival Evolved. The Morellatops was also a creature that received a much needed TLC. It now has its own water stats that can be leveled, meaning it can carry much more water for you when playing Scorched Earth, a map renowned for having a lack of water sources. Adding to this, it can also slowly fill its water tank levels when force-fed cactus sap, which admittedly doesn't go up by much, but it does harvest cactus sap in bucket loads, so it will always come in handy. Not only does it have new water tank abilities, but it also has the ability to irrigate crops for you. Once you have some crop plots down with some fertilizer and seeds, navigate to its radial menu and select the enable irrigation option, and your Morellatops will get right to work watering any nearby crops that require water. Clever girl. This can also be done manually when ridden by pressing the crouch key. It is now known as the Morella Crops. Creature pathfinding was reworked for ARK Survival Ascended and was emphasized to be so much smarter upon release. It's kinda hit and miss, but wild creatures are definitely much smarter and will pretty much always walk around traps and structures to get to you rather than just gunning straight to the player's location. So trapping creatures for taming became a tiny little bit more troublesome. Overall, I do like the pathfinding changes. However, I can't say much about the tamed creature pathfinding, especially when following the player, as I would confidently say that this is worse than Evolved. Ever since the release of the game and following DLC maps, there are many mythical creatures that could not breed. However, our dreams came true in ARK Survival Ascended, the first one being the Basilisk, and I cannot express how excited I was to have breedable basilisks in the game. Followed by the Karkanos, a fan favourite that I'm sure a lot of people were happy to see babies popping out left, right and centre for. And most recently with Ragnarok came breedable Griffins, which I think is safe to say was the most popular request from players for so many years now, including myself, and is probably the one I am most hyped about as it is one of my favourite flyers in the game. Closing it out for breedable mythical beasts so far is the Phoenix, another fan favourite which strangely wasn't breedable until just a few weeks ago, which I'm sure none of us are complaining about. While on the subject of the Phoenix, it did receive a few more changes. In ARK Survival Evolved, the Phoenix can do many things, yet it couldn't do the most simplest of tasks, which is land. They would just hover around in the air, which was probably one of the most annoying things to have in your base, but luckily we can now land our Phoenixes in ASA. Its ranged fire attack also received a small change. Before it would burn players off the back of mounted creatures. This is however not the case anymore. Moving back to some TLC, we have a very surprising entry, which is the Pegomastax. Who would have known that one of the most annoying creatures in the game is now one of the most useful to have around your base? The Pego now has the ability to pick up gacha crystals, which can be enabled via its radial menu. I do believe the range of which it can pick up crystals depends on the level of it, so a higher level will naturally have more range. This makes the Pego a much needed creature when setting up a gacha farm. The Dunkleosteus, Doedicurus and the Ankylosaurus all received a welcome TLC very recently, giving them all a harvest only mode. This can be accessed and enabled via their radial wheels or quickly selected activated when mounted by pressing and holding the reload button, able to select which specific resources you'd like them to harvest for you. Maybe you're on a metal run and tired of dropping all that unwanted stone. Well, you won't have to do that anymore with this option if you choose to enable it. This leads us on perfectly to the next small TLC regarding the Doedicurus and the Ankylosaurus. Once picked up by the Argentavis or the Carcanos, for example, they will no longer stop auto-harvesting upon exceeding 50% of their weight capacity. They will now keep on swinging even when over-encumbered or slot-capped. Can't stop, won't stop. This will make metal runs much more enjoyable for all those solo players. Well, that is if you can even call a metal run enjoyable. Moving on to a few gacha changes, mate-boosted gacha pairs can now be closer to other pairs before becoming unhappy. In ASE, I'm pretty sure it's around 14 foundations apart. It is now roughly around 10 or 11 foundations apart in ASA. Adding to that, they will also become sad when in caves, so you'll have a tough time using gachas if setting up base in a cave. When unhappy, they rarely drop crystals or pick up items off of the ground. And finally, a little visually pleasing update. The gacha's radial menu now shows an image of all the resources it can produce, rather than a wheel with only text, which is how it appeared in ARK Survival Evolved. This is also a feature with the moss chops. The next two kinda came out of nowhere, but the Terrorbird receives some new running animations. It looks super derpy, but it will definitely cheer you up seeing this if you're out and about having a rough day on the ARK. In the same update came the Carbon MS with some new movement animations. I actually really like this change. They look so much more natural and less robotic with these new animations. Another creature receiving a tiny bit of love was the Onyx. It has now been given the ability to land with some grand animations, which is nice to see them perform other animations than just constantly hovering around flapping about. The Megalosaurus is known as the apex predator of aberration. However, although being a deadly force when ridden, any unridden Megalosaurus would always use their secondary grab attack over the primary bite attack, which is where their high damage output comes from, so it made them pretty much useless unless mounted. In ARK Survival Ascended, they were let off the leash and can now use their primary bite attack when unmounted, making them a much deadlier force on aberration and much more viable on other maps. And I could safely say there's not many species in ARK that can bring down a boss's health so quickly, and these were just level 150 tamed Megalosaurus. You just gotta time your boss fights at nighttime at 8:25 PM on the dot if possible, and they will tear anything and everything a new one. The Jerboa was another cutie that received a huge change. Back in Survival Evolved, they would always spawn at level 1 in the wild, which of course means they were extremely squishy. However, in Survival Ascended, they now spawn up to level 150, meaning their stats are much better. They now also probably have the highest weight stat of any shoulder pet in the game. I never thought I'd see the day where I'll be relying on the Jerboa to help me carry twice the amount of metal from a metal run back in my 100 Days Scorched Earth video, when the only flyer I had access to was the Lymantria. Oh, so cute! Headshot multipliers have been added for an array of different creatures. This was only present with a small selection of creatures back in Survival Evolved. This makes going for headshots a priority to dish out more damage to kill or to deal more torpor if tranking out for taming. The Dino camera zoom was also another welcomed addition to ARK Survival Ascended, giving players the choice to alter the camera to our liking when mounted. Another great addition that got added in a recent update was the auto run feature. This can be used by the player on foot when riding creatures or even when driving a raft, etc, etc, and found on the radial wheel when pressing and holding the reload button. I cannot emphasize enough how awesome this feature is, but if we're talking from the perspective of riding a creature, then this feature is perfect for those long flights when using a slow flyer. No more having to hold down W or forward on the analog sticks. Now we can just sit back and enjoy the show, maybe even grab a cup of tea from downstairs if you're keen. The Equus kick attack that deals torpor will now penetrate armor more effectively to targets, allowing for an easier knockout. On PvP-enabled servers, weapons can no longer be used by the player when mounted on either the Rock Drake, Megalania, or the Ravager. The Phylocolio no longer takes health damage while running through the center map's puzzle cave. Back in ARK Survival Evolved, you could still just about cheese the artifact, but the Phylo would take massive health damage over time. The impregnation process of a Reaper is also much different in ARK Survival Ascended. The baby's levels will now scale with the player level, which basically means the higher level of your character, the higher the level of the baby you can obtain. So to my understanding, if you are impregnated by a max level 150 queen, and your player level is anywhere below level 105, the embryo will be around level 90, plus the extra levels that you gain from killing creatures, which caps at plus 75 levels, so should be able to pop out a baby around level 165. If you're level 105 or above, you can pop out a baby around level 197, and finally, if your survivor is level 155, you'll be able to pop out a level 227-ish baby. Creature mutations also received a big change in ASA. There's not really a quick and easy way to explain how mutations work in a video like this, but back in Survival Evolved, let's say you had bred and gained mutations into health on a creature line. That mutation was then tied to the health stat and that stat alone. However, in ARK Survival Ascended, let's say you gained 20 mutations into a health stat of a creature with 9,000 base health, but then you tamed a wild of that species later down the line with a higher base health stat. You can then transfer those mutations on top of the new stat, allowing you to improve your health breeding line. It's a very similar and complicated process to the breeding in Evolved, but I'd say it's better and more flexible, so hopefully I'm making sense. If I'm not, I did see that Mystic on ARK just released a very in-depth and straight-to-the-point breeding guide for ARK Survival Ascended. A nice updated version, so I highly recommend checking that one out. Link will be in the description of the video. Moving on to some much needed and maybe some not so needed stat changes to a few creatures. The Spinosaurus has received a health buff. Its health scaling has now been increased by 15%. I still don't think it will compete with the Rex, but every little helps. While on the subject of the Spino's bipedal claw attack was nerfed in ARK Survival Ascended, which is a change I really disliked. The speed of this attacker was pretty much twice as fast in ARK Survival Evolved. I do always question why they changed it in the first place. I am still hoping for them to revert it back to its original attack speed. Here is one I am a big fan of, as I am a serious mammoth lover. Its health scaling has been increased by a whopping 20%. Not that they didn't have enough health already, but hey, I'm not complaining. The Bronto's health scaling has also been increased by 10%. I guess they weren't a fan of poison attacks, as the Basilisk damage scaling was decreased by 20%. And it didn't end there. The Poison Wyvern also received a huge nerf, having its damage scaling decreased by a beefy 40%, which I guess is something I was a little sad about being a PvE player. Well, a much needed change came with the Quetzal, having a 15% movement speed increase, which is probably still not enough for me to want to use one, but at least it was shown a little bit of love. A couple of wild changes and additions to cover. I feel confident in saying that everyone hates the Aberrant Raptor's ability to pounce and immobilize the player. The amount of times I have died to this and got stuck in a never-ending death loop is probably uncountable. While we were all pleasantly surprised with the release of Aberration, realizing that this was no longer a thing. Wild Aberrant Raptors cannot do us dirty anymore. Giant queen bees are commonly roaming around in the open. It doesn't seem like a big change, but oh man, I hate taming giant bees, especially from a beehive. But in Ascended, we have the choice of taming a queen bee from a hive, or the easy way out, shoving food straight up its bum right off the bat in the open, which makes them so much easier to tame. Roaming wild babies were also added with the release of the game. The only wild babies found in Survival Evolved was the Kairuku. In Ascended, 80 to 90% of creatures have a chance to spawn in with babies. These can be claimed for yourself after either killing or taming the parent of the baby, or if you're a meanie, give players an easy source of raw prime meat. While this was a very surprising new addition to the game, as I'm pretty sure in ASE the Tech Giga had a template and can actually be spawned in through console commands. However, it never actually naturally spawned on any map as far as I am aware. The Tech Giga now spawns naturally on the Extinction map, making them a highly desirable tame to own, being as they can spawn up to level 180 in the wild, just like other tech variants. And we all know that the higher level means higher base stats and a higher chance of getting a better damage stat. They also spawn on Astraeus, however I haven't seen them spawning on any other maps as of now. Another surprise with the Extinction map release was the King Titan being added as a roaming world boss. I really loved that they added this big boy. It's nice to see them giving us a little bit extra content with every map installment, as opposed to what we have in Survival Evolved. This boss is a weaker version of the King Titan, spawns once a day for a short duration of time, and can be killed for a little bit of loot and some world buffs that can aid you and your tribe in many beneficial ways. If you like exploring the deep dangerous parts of Aberration, then you'll be glad to know that the Basilisk is now radiation immune. A great change for all the Basilisk lovers out there. The Ragnarok boss arena in Survival Evolved consisted of a Norse-themed destroyed village, where you had to fight the Manticore and dragon at the same time. However, with the remaster of Ragnarok in Ascended came a new formidable enemy, Nunatak, a completely new Ragnarok exclusive Ice Wyvern boss with a new Frozen Lake-themed arena, which is very cool in itself, and if you look closely you could spot a frozen Manticore and dragon boss lying dead, completely frozen over, implying that all the bosses went at it to the death, and Nunatak was the victor, therefore becoming Ragnarok's new guardian. The Rhinianafa now spawns naturally in the swamp regions of Ragnarok, a change I'm not really pleased about as I hate the creature, but I know a lot of people were happy to see it. Also naturally spawning on Ragnarok is the Karkanos from Aberration, which was a very welcomed addition. The Aberrant Megalania was also an interesting one in Survival Evolved. Apparently it never naturally spawned on any map other than Fjordur. However, they now commonly spawn naturally in Aberration's Red Zone and also Ragnarok's Wyvern Cave in Survival Ascended. Another creature change that I was a little disappointed with was Ragnarok's Lava Golem not dropping any loot on its body once killed. I'm honestly still hoping for them to bring this back to its original state in Survival Evolved, but yeah, running the jungle dungeon isn't half as rewarding as it used to be. Wild and tamed creatures will now look around curiously. A nice mini touch-up, which is simple but effective. Another great change to wild creature behavior is that they now naturally randomly play animations. Once again, simple but very effective. I am such a big fan of this feature. I love exploring, minding my own business to come across a creature doing this. It's really nice to see. And the final change, which is actually one I forgot to add in with the rest of the Phoenix's new changes from earlier in the video. But yes, they now come in an array of dazzling colors, whereas in Survival Evolved, they only came in an orangey-like color. Absolutely BEA beautiful. And that is going to be the end of the video. I hope you all enjoyed it or found it helpful in any way. And if you did, please don't forget to like, comment, share around and subscribe for more. I'd really appreciate it, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care. Goodbye.